when I first have conversations with potential clients, whether they're hiring me as a consultant or their publicist or for marketing, the thing that I'm asked time and time again is what sells a book? And the answer is complicated. Because as I wrote in my newsletter, publishers really drive the boat in what sells a book. So they have a lot of say in what books get paid attention to. I was just reading an article in Esquire about Sally Rooney's new book, Intermezzo, and the huge ARC campaign, Advanced Reader Copy campaign, that FSG did for the book, where they actually numbered the ARCs so they can trace them back to people they sent them to make sure that they weren't being sold online. And the problem with something like that, and I'm writing about it actually now, the problem with something like that is you've already, as a publisher, you've already put it out there that this book is so huge, you must pay attention to it. And so people are paying attention to it. And then the story in Esquire gets into how having one of Sally Rooney's ARCs is a status symbol. And I feel like that's problematic for the industry, because what about all the other authors? What about the smaller publishers who don't have the budget to do that many ARCs, or the marketing money to put out there and do influencer mailings and things like that? So I feel like, when we talk about what sells a book, we also have to talk about what publishers are doing to make readers aware of certain books and kind of ignore other books that are out there.
Okay, I got to interrupt, because I feel like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, or you can add or subtract from this, but it seems to me like the business of publishing is structured in such a way that publishers are acquiring projects, they're acquiring novels and memoirs and all the rest, and they are evaluating them internally. Mm-hmm. They are essentially placing wagers on which books they think have the most or the highest chances of succeeding in the marketplace. They pick their favorites, essentially, and they push their chips, as it were, in the direction of these books. They invest in them on the front end in terms of marketing, ARCs, all the stuff that you were just talking about. Right. And then they essentially let the rest of their list languish, more or less. I know that some effort is put into books that are not as highly prioritized, but those books, I've been through that. My books have been through that, where there's not like some huge undertaking in the works to try to get the word out or to try to get booksellers to prioritize. And the publishers are basically willing to take their losses on those books, knowing that maybe a couple of them might buck the trend or buck the odds and succeed on their own merits, or through some sort of word of mouth thing or some sort of lucky break in the media somehow. Is that it?
That is a lot of it. What happens is, for every publisher, especially the big five, they have to ship out a certain amount of copies per year or per fiscal quarter to make their numbers. So when you ship copies to bookstores that have ordered copies, and I'm talking about every book, not just the big ones, there's billing to be had, because they're charging the retailers for buying the books. So every publisher must have a certain amount of billing every fiscal year. And that's why they have to acquire a certain amount of books every season, because they need to meet those numbers every year. They need to meet the billing numbers every year. And then, the sales figures are under a different category, in the spreadsheet. So you have what you're billing. So you could pay $25,000 for an advance of a small literary book, and you can bill, say, for discussion's sake, 3,000 copies. You're billing, 3,000 copies have been shipped. out of those, how many will sell? We don't know, but we know that we build the bookstores a certain amount, for buying X amount of copies. So publishers have to acquire more than just bestsellers to make that all work. It doesn't make sense, but that's how it's done. And that's why I think, publishers who pop up who say, we're only doing X amount of books per year, that's much smarter to me, because why, and I ask this all the time in the newsletter, why acquire a book when you can't put anything behind it, when you can't put any muscle behind it?
Yes. Yeah, precisely. That was kind of leading to my next question is like, do you think this is the smartest, best, only way to run publishing as a business? It seems crazy to me to have these
crazy.
Yeah, to
It
have
is crazy.
like basically, I think a majority of the products that you sell getting very little attention internally and very little marketing and publicity efforts to try to make them successful. You're essentially acquiring them, putting them out into the world, and just accepting on the front end that they're like very likely to not succeed in the marketplace.
Right. And those are the authors that get very low advances because there's a lot less risk involved for publishers. They don't tag those books as being huge bestsellers. So it's sort of the mentality of let's throw it against the wall and see if it sticks. But at the same time, you have somebody's writing career in your hands. And if they're a debut author, and the book doesn't sell well, they're going to have a horrible time trying to sell their second book. And they're going to have a horrible time getting a larger advance. Every now and then there's a surprise hit. A book takes off for whatever reason, word of mouth, and the publisher maybe didn't pay a lot of money for it. But those instances are so rare because publishers will earmark certain books as big books and put big money behind them in marketing and publicity and do all of these things to make sure that that particular title is making it in front of reviewers, so much that they can't ignore it, or, booksellers that they can't ignore it, that they have to put it, front of store. And it's not fair to the other books. It's not fair to the two other authors. And it's unhealthy for the industry, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree. It just seems crazy to me. It's like putting all your eggs in one basket. And I think like, I get that they need to meet their orders. Like that side of things, I actually had not heard articulated quite as like succinctly as you just did it. But that piece of it, I guess, makes some sense in terms of they have to acquire X number of books each year just to make the math work in terms of their bookstore orders. But in a more perfect universe, it seems to me that the answer is that publishers should acquire fewer books and put the resources into making them successful. Like there's too many books acquired and published is what it seems like.
Yeah, that's always been a problem. And it's because they're stuck in this cycle of having to acquire X amount of books to meet the billing requirements from, the CFO of the company and the CEO, and on and on and on and on. And it's hard to pull back on that because once you do, layoffs start to happen and imprints will close and things like that. So it's a really broken ecosystem. And, that's why, someone like Authors Equity is exciting to me, the new publishing company that Madeline McIntosh and others started. Madeline was the ex-CEO of Penguin Random House, where they're not acquiring, a ton of books and trying to publish all of them. They're being really smart, I think, about how they're acquiring and what they're acquiring, so I think that something like that is more feasible these days than an imprint at a large publisher who publishes, 75 books a year, but only 10 of them get good attention.
Okay. So that you sort of answered my question, but it's like, it does beg the question, like, are there entities, companies, indies, like entrepreneurial ventures out there that are trying to buck the system and invent new models for how to publish books more effectively and equitably for the authors that they acquire. Can you describe in a little bit more detail how authors' equity works? I want to say we might have talked about this in a prior conversation, but like it bears repeating because
We did.
this is where the rubber meets the road. This is what I think like I want to hear about is like, how are we going to fix this?
Yeah, I mean, their model basically is that, instead of advances, authors get equity. So it's sort of like Artist Equity, the company that Ben Affleck and Matt Damon founded, where everybody who works on a film gets a piece of the residuals. They get a piece of what the film makes. So you have skin in the game. Everybody has skin in the game. And that's how they're modeling their publishing program. So if you say they signed me up to do a book, I wouldn't get a advance per se, but I would get like higher royalty, or I'd get, a share in like whatever the book sold. I'm getting X amount of dollars per book that's sold. So I think it's really important to make that distinction because, and I think we talked about this before too, author advances make no sense at all. It's magic math. It's made up math. And there's no, formula that is exactly right to decide what an author should get paid for writing a book. It's just basically throwing money at things and seeing what comes back. And in some instances where, something's in high demand, meaning, an agent is holding an auction for a book, and an auction is really a way to artificially drive up the price of a book, because when an agent says, this is an auction, give me your best bids, it's sort of like buying a house, right? You put your best bid and see if you get the book or not. So often publishers will overpay because you don't know how much the other people are bidding. So, in some instances, the author will say, well, I really like talking to this editor, even though they're offering a little bit less money, I'd like to go with them because there's a, camaraderie with the editor and they feel more comfortable with them. But for the most part, you could pay $50,000 for a book and the other bids could have been $20,000 and you don't know that.
Right.
And then you have to try to recoup that advance, which is incredibly difficult to do these days.
Well, and when it comes to authors' equity and the way that they structure their deals, like you say, there's no advance and that authors will then get like a piece and it'll typically be higher than the standard kind of boilerplate contract that most like what lower level and mid-list authors get, where I don't even know what it is anymore. It's like you end up
all over the place.
It's all over the place. But I guess that's the question that I would have about authors' equity is that when you sell a book to them, if they are acquiring a novel by me, my agent would then like make a bespoke contract with them. Like there's a negotiation that happens. And so the authors who are at authors' equity might all have different deals, or do they just have one standard deal that they give to?
I don't know, but I'm guessing not everybody has a different deal. So I'm not sure. I can't speak to that part of it, but I'm guessing that depending on what it is, some people have, different deals than other people. They're coming out of the gate with strong authors who have very large platforms. So, that, and when you're a new publisher, that's what you have to do. You have to come out of the gate with a really strong list so people will pay attention. But I think, because they're being very cautious in what they publish and how it would work, they have the ability to take more time and make very good decisions about what to put out in the marketplace instead of it being part of a larger publishing ecosystem, say Penguin Random House, which is, too big. I think 11 out of the 20, out of the 20 books on the National Book Award long list are Penguin Random House books. That's a lot. And that's coming from one publisher. And so you look around and you're like, well, but what about all the other books that they publish? What happens to those? And they just get lost. And that's really a shame. I mean, I've seen it happen in almost every big publishing house. And then the problem is that the big publishers who are, owned by conglomerates, or in Simon and Schuster's case, owned by private equity, they have a cash flow that independent publishers don't have. So then you have all this promotional stuff that happens for books from big publishers where the small guys can't compete with them. They can't compete with them with advances. They can't compete with them in marketing dollars. So it's really an uneven ecosystem that we're dealing with.
And it's because of what the backlist, like they're making all that money they have cash flow, like you say, coming from this huge reservoir of titles going back decades and decades and centuries.
Yeah. If you look at the financials for any of the big five, you'll find that at least 60% of their current revenue comes from backlist titles.
The classics.
Yes. Sometimes it's 75%. And I always say the backlist pays for the front list. That's exactly what happens. So when you're acquiring front list titles, what you're looking at and what you're assessing is this kind of, a current event thing that's a one-hit wonder and we just want to sell as many copies as we can? Or is this a book, and I'll use Sally Rooney again as an example, because she backlists really well. Are these books that are going to be read over and over again by new audiences? And for her, the answer is yes.
She does well.
She does extremely well without doing very many interviews at all.
Yeah, I tried to get her on my show. I can't get her on my show. She doesn't like to do that stuff. But, good for her, right? She doesn't need to.
No, she doesn't need to.
She's in the catbird seat. And I want to say, isn't she like a communist or something? And yet she's like succeeding wildly in the marketplace. I love that.
A Marxist. I read today she's a Marxist. Yes.
Yeah, she's a Marxist who's also just like an unbelievably successful capitalist, even though she doesn't want to be, maybe. But
yeah.
So when it comes to like, now that we've sort of talked about authors' equity as like this outlier and this sort of like experimental laboratory for a different way of doing it, when it comes to the bulk of publishers and especially like the big five publishers who, as you say, are sort of dominating publishing, the Penguin Random House behemoths of the world, they acquire a book, they make their determinations about how they feel internally about the list that they've acquired. And then they make their wagers. And then when it comes to trying to make a book sell, I think we'll start with marketing. Like that entails a lot, right? That's not just like one thing. There's lots of different things that publishers can invest in to help market a book. And I also think like when it comes to these kinds of conversations, especially for people who might not have a lot of like business acumen or experience in corporate America or whatever, like marketing. That means just like taking a product to market and doing things to help it sell. Like, what is marketing? I know that's such a root.
What it is, that's exactly what it is. And so marketing today entails a lot of different things. It entails influencer outreach, on Instagram and TikTok. It entails something called a white box mailing, which is, done by the American Booksellers Association, and publishers pay to have a piece of marketing material or an arc, depending on how much money they want to spend, in literally a white box that goes to 700 booksellers. So if you're paying for that, and there's only so much money you have and so much space in each month's white box mailing, you're not putting every book you publish in there. You have to choose your battles. And so, a Sally Rooney book would be in there. A breakout, maybe a debut that they paid a lot of money for that needs to be a breakout book will be in there. Just to put it in front of booksellers' eyes and to say, you're sending a very distinct message by doing a white box mailing. You're saying this book is important enough for us to pay for this piece of promotional material to be here so you can see it. And it makes booksellers pay attention.
So that's
to
how
those
the
books.
that's how the indie next list happens.
Yeah.
Publishers make a determination. They might. How many books do you think a publisher like picks off of their seasonal list?
You can only, you can only put so many, they only accept so many things for a white box. So, it could be, could be 2 books for an entire publisher.
And
It could be,
well, and a white box, and a white box is like just like a white box. Like, what is this white box you speak of?
it's a white box
Okay.
that has it's usually arcs, and I forget how much per piece it costs, but you're talking about a substantial amount of money, marketing money. It could be a sell, like a sell sheet is what we call it. It's literally a good piece of stock paper with the image of the cover on it, book description, ISBN, price, all that. And, bullet points of what kind of publicity and marketing campaign you're going to do for it to say, again, this book is big enough for you to pay attention to. This is what we want you to pay attention to. And authors and agents really don't have a say in what goes in a white box. It's really, truly the publisher's determination along with the sales department. Who, the sales department will sometimes suggest, you should do a white box mailing for this book. If they get on board with something and fully support it and want to see it go further.
Yeah. That's a question that arises talking about all of this is how are these decisions made internally, generally speaking, at a publishing house? Like in my head, I'm thinking, oh, there's some executive editor who's sort of running the show who kind of like puts their finger on the scale, but it might be the sales, it's some collaboration, or is there feedback
it's
from
collaboration? Yeah, sales has a lot of say, actually, which I don't think a lot of people realize that. But when you're presenting titles at sales conference, and sales conference is basically what every publisher does. They present an entire season worth of books to the sales force. They have all their sales reps from all over the country come in, or maybe they do it virtually now. And everybody is sort of in the old days, it was sequestered somewhere. There's a story about me driving over a golf course in Tennessee to get to sales conference for running.
So wait, sequestered meaning they do some sort of company retreat?
Yeah. And everybody's there and stuff. So I run, not to get off the subject, but when I was the VP of publicity and marketing at Running Press, we had our sales conference outside of Nashville. I think it was in Jackson, Tennessee. And I'm a Starbucks girl, so I needed to find one in the morning. I wanted my coffee and I found one, but then I looked at the clock and I was like, crap, I'm running so late for the presentation. And I got back to where the sales conference was being held. It was at a country club, and I drove over the golf course to get to the presentation.
Did you
anything for books?
I was going to say that's commitment.
Yeah. So when you're there, and whether you're doing it virtually or whether you're doing it sequestered away somewhere, everybody is presenting their list to the sales department. And that's the time where sales will get feedback on publicity plans, marketing plans. They'll tell you if they hate a title or a subtitle or a book cover. All of that gets discussed with sales. So nothing happens in a silo. It's not one person saying, we need to change the subtitle of this book, or we need to change the cover of this book. There's always input from marketing, from sales, from publicity. Everything originates from editorial, but then once it's acquired and is on the list and then a publication date is determined, other things start to pop up. So we can, send around a cover and sales could say, we hate this, we think it should be something different. They'll see the publicity plans and say, well, what can't you get this for this book? Or we think this will work for this. So sales is very influential in those decisions.
I wonder if there are people, I mean, there have to be people who are better than others at like betting on these horses, if we're going to use that comp. Like, there must be people who have a gift for identifying books that will get traction in the marketplace or that have the best chance of succeeding. And like, I guess those would be like really successful acquiring editors. Those kinds of people often will get described that way, but there might be people in
Mhm.
sales departments. Like, I just wonder who these people are. I want to know who the really gifted betters are, you know?
Well, I mean, someone who is really gifted at it in sales, unfortunately passed away not too long ago. Gary Erda, who was the president of sales at Simon and Schuster. I worked with him, when I was VP of publicity at Atria. He was the associate publisher of Atria. So he was kind of my office husband there. And then he went back to sales and became the president of sales there. He understood really well the marketplace and where books would fall within that marketplace. So he was gifted in that sense. And, he died suddenly. And I think that leaves a huge void in sales at S&S. I can't speak for other publishing houses, but, when you meet someone who is in tune with the marketplace, because I've worked with a lot of sales departments that they're just like, is the Phil Donahue show still on? When you find those people in sales who really, they get publicity and they get marketing, that's really a gift. It is a gift. And it's the same with editors. If they really understand the marketplace, and I'm not just talking about books, I'm talking about the marketplace as a whole. They understand what's going on with consumers. That's something that is really valuable for a company.
Okay, because that was what I was going to say. Like, what makes a guy like Gary so gifted and so like in touch and able to, I think, kind of hone this intuitive understanding of what is going to succeed? It's just somebody who's curious, open, paying attention,
Hmm. Hmm.
consuming
Yeah.
culture in all different verticals, like very
Yeah.
online, I guess these days would be
Yeah.
part of it. Like somebody who's just hustling.
That's exactly it. What I've seen during my career is that some editors, live in a silo. They only listen to NPR. So what they know of the media or what is going on in pop culture, they get from NPR and that's it. They're not, necessarily watching shows, streaming, or looking at Instagram to see what other brands are doing or what influencers are doing or what book talk, what's happening on book talk. Although I would say now probably editors have to look at book talk, probably part of their marching orders from publishers to see what books are trending on there. But, in before there was TikTok, there were a lot of other things that I think editors should have been consuming when they come to editorial meetings, and I'd just be kind of like, well, who is the market for this? Because that's not at all what's going on right now in the broad sense of the retail market.
Well, what it's making me think is that there would be a way to quantify success at identifying books that do well. There must be, you would think there could be like some sort of spreadsheet or some sort of like tracking mechanism to see who's got the best batting average. And those people should be the ones running the show. And it makes me also think that, like, as an author, I would love to have dialogue with somebody like Gary, somebody
Mhm.
who's out there. Like, not that you can write to the market. I don't think that works. You can't like hear what's selling
No,
now and then write a book towards it, because it's going to be different by the time you get there and you can only be you.
exactly.
But still, I still would love to hear like perspectives like that, because I think there is this big void between authors and people who truly are tapped in, and there can't be that many of them. I think what we need to do is we need to identify. There needs to be a mechanism to identify the people who are really fucking good at picking
Yeah.
horses, and then we need to hear from those people.
I think you're absolutely right, but I also think that publishers build a wall around those people so that they're not accessible, and there's also a lot of politics involved internally where, certain editors, they may not be producing hits, but they're protected because someone up top really likes them and they've been there for a million years. I think we've seen that happen at Knopf with layoffs that happened there. There were a lot of longtime editors, who were not acquiring current books. They were keeping track of their backlist titles. And once, Sunny Maeda was gone, they were not protected anymore.
They lost their champion.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel badly about that. But at the same time, publishing is a business. And we've talked about that too. It's a business and you have to be able to be bringing in, books that are going to make a profit. It's fine if the backlist is making a profit, but what is there really for you to do as an editor with the backlist? Update it? I don't know, So you can't be paying a high salary for somebody to do that. That's just it's a business decision.
Yeah. I mean, you're paid typically for what you're doing or what you're going to do, not for what you have done, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what else? There's, another part of marketing is trade shows, which is kind of this like, that I start to glaze over as soon as I hear those two words, but I feel like this is part of the machine, right? And there are authors who are sort of, tagged as, these are the ones we're betting on. These are the books that we're betting on, and they will be sent off to these trade shows as part of the like pre-publication marketing push.
Yep. Yeah. I actually have a client who just did the New England Booksellers Association trade show. He's published by Blackstone, who does an amazing job with their authors, by the way. They're really good. Their marketing and publicity departments, and they're a mid-sized independent publisher. So, so the idea with trade shows, regional trade shows, and they have them for the West Coast, the East Coast, it's Northeast, and then they have Mid-Atlantic. And then there's, I forget what it's like, the Mountain Independent Booksellers Association, like Colorado and that area. And what happens is when publishers earmark a book for, success at indie booksellers, they'll try to get their author into one of these trade shows to either speak, or sometimes they do what's called the movable feast, which is, authors, there's an author at every table with buyers from independent bookstores. And then they all keep switching seats so they could talk to everybody, during dinner and dessert. Dating. Yeah, it's like speed dating. That's exactly what it's like.
Yeah.
So it's a nice thing for authors to do. But again, first of all, you have to pitch them. Sales does, get involved with that. And the sales department will tell you, you should pitch this person for, it's called NEBA, the Northeast Independent Booksellers Association. You should pitch them for this, and it can't be done for everybody. So, it's done for specific authors, and it's done, for books that publishers feel have a real shot at being hand sold by independent booksellers. And then you have something like the American Library Association regional trade show. It's the same deal. You're earmarking books and authors who you're going to send to these trade shows that you want to, really put in front of librarians, booksellers. There's VoucherCon, which is for mystery writers. That's another, big one that.
Wait, what's it called?
VoucherCon.
Voucher?
Voucher.
What is
VoucherCon. It is a convention for mystery and thriller writers.
But is Voucher somebody's name? I guess it must be. Right?
I have no idea.
Okay. I'm like, what's mysterious about Voucher?
Right. So VoucherCon is where, mystery and thriller authors are sent, and same thing, it's for fans, although that one, fans go, but also sellers, and, there are different events you can pitch authors for. It's, VoucherCon is also involved in the Edgars, the mystery awards. So there are a lot of different opportunities for publishers to send authors places to meet with booksellers, but again, it can't be every author. So it's very specific authors who sales and marketing and the publisher and editors all decide, like, we want to shoot our shot on this person.
So we're going to send you to BoucherCon. We're going to put you up at the Courtyard by Marriott, and we're going to make you a star.
That's exactly right.
That's the life of a high level author. But the question I have, and a question I think that listeners might be asking themselves, is like, can some rando sign up or pay to crash one of these trade shows, or is it's just a bubbled environment?
It's just a bubble environment. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
You have to be invited.
I feel like somebody should crash one. I want to crash it.
All right, why don't we do that?
Yeah, just bring a box of books, just sit down at the speed dating table and pretend that you were sent there by somebody, Nobody would know.
Right.
So then, I mean, that's trade shows, and there's not that many of, like, there's a few big ones. They're sort of regional, and that's another way that publishers, and big publishers in particular, sort of signal to the market, like, these are the books to pay attention to. These are the big books of the season.
Yeah, it's like when Book Expo was still around, that was the big convention that publishers would send authors, either their, huge best-selling authors, to do signings or showcase, their big books for that fall. And you were only allowed to showcase X amount of books. That's for every imprint. So, when you had a booth at Book Expo at the Javits Center in New York, for example, when you're putting together that booth, they're putting together the graphics for inside the booth. Every imprint was asked, give us only 6 titles. Imagine that. Only 6 titles for the entire imprint for your fall list. And that's all you were allowed to submit for it. And so, you'd have a lot of upset authors because they wanted to go to Book Expo. They wanted to know that their book was there. And if it wasn't, it would kind of be like, well, you need to talk to your editor about that, But also, I've been to Book Expo where I've had somebody do a signing and, like, they're next to someone super popular and the line is all the way down and they have like 2 people. And that's pretty demoralizing too.
I want to start my own. It's going to be called LoserCon, and it's just going to be for all the books and authors who don't get this treatment. Come to LoserCon.
I will co-found it with you.
Yeah. I feel like there'd be a huge audience for this. We could hold. I don't know where we hold it. It'd be at some like janky, like not convention center, but some sort of like Courtyard by Marriott.
6.
Yeah, it'll be like Courtyard by Marriott ballroom. LoserCon 2025.
That's right.
So
imagine the ticket sales, though, Brad.
The ticket sales. I think it would be a huge hit. I think we're onto something. And if anyone out there would like to bankroll this, we welcome it.
Yes.
So we've kind of covered marketing, trade shows. We've covered the indie next list and these like mysterious white boxes. And then there is advertising, which I want to say you've told me before that, like, advertising, especially print advertising, is of limited utility in your opinion in terms of its efficacy or, its ability to actually move books.
Yeah, it just doesn't. And lately I've been experimenting with different kinds of digital advertising, and that is, there's never a guarantee. And, what I say to people when we do some digital advertising, say it's in like a specific newsletter, like the books newsletter for The Atlantic, and you get the report back and there's only 70 clicks and you spent X amount of dollars. My feeling is those are 70 clicks you wouldn't have otherwise, there are a lot of views, but really what you're looking at is the conversion. You want, you want to see those clicks turn into sales, and it's kind of hard to quantify that at times. Amazon advertising is a completely different beast. I feel like Amazon advertising is much easier to quantify because you're doing it in a certain time period and you can see whether or not sales are affected by it much easier on
Well,
Amazon.
I was going to say you're also advertising within an
Hmm.
actual marketplace, like a sales
Yeah,
environment. It's not like somewhere on the internet and then they got to click through and go. Like you're on Amazon and you're
right.
placing an advertisement, what for your book, but it's within a book that's associated in terms of its appeal and audience and demographic and all that kind of stuff.
Yep. So it's really, I often tell people, if you have a couple $100 to spare, try Amazon advertising for 30 days and see where it gets you because it operates much like Facebook advertising does. You're only charged when someone clicks. So you could see how fast you go through that $200 budget. And if it's leading the sales of the book after that 30 days is done, continue and put more money into it. Some publishers have huge Amazon advertising budgets. And, what I saw specifically when I was at Skyhorse Publishing was, they switched from doing Facebook advertising to putting a lot of money into Amazon advertising. And it really worked because, we would see sales reports every week and you could look at what the sales were versus, the time that the Amazon ads were running and see that it was converting into sales.
Yeah, because I mean that's a question I will often have about how to measure the effectiveness of a digital advertisement, whether it's like a static, digital advertisement or a GIF ad or whatever it is, or even a
Mm-hmm.
podcast ad, because
Yep.
very rarely in my experience as a consumer do I see an ad, click an ad, and then buy a product. Maybe I will do that, but it's not often. What will more often be the case is that I will see an ad. I might see it more than once. I might see it in more than one place. I will have that book in my head. And then, like 2 or 3 months later, I might buy it when I'm at the bookstore because I'm familiar with it. Like there can be a
Right.
long tail and a sort of meandering path to conversion that's impossible to measure. And that doesn't mean that the ad wasn't effective. It just means that you don't know exactly how it was effective as the advertiser.
It's 100% true because, I mean, the old advertising rule is people have to see something 3 times before before they buy it. The only exception I would say is Instagram and Facebook are they're so good at putting right in front of your face exactly what you want that I've bought stuff from ads on there because they're listening to basically my conversations. They know my search history. They're putting it in front of you, So when I see like this particular LL Bean sweater I've been wanting since last year, somehow it's showing up in my feed again. It remembers that I clicked on that sweater last year. And so it's putting it right in front of me. Not all advertising is like that. So, books don't do as well on Instagram and Facebook because of that.
Well, it's interesting because on Instagram, I was joking about this the other day. They keep showing me videos of people jumping off of cliffs. I'm like, what's going on here? Just
There's
end
something
it.
you want to talk about?
Yeah, right. They're trying to tell me it's over. Just end it.
Yes.
Just jump. But no, it's like more like these like sort of like radical, extreme sports people who are, I guess that gets your attention. Maybe I watch them so they keep feeding me them. But it's like, what am I
That
supposed
could
to
be
do?
it. Totally.
Got some maniac jumping off a 500-foot cliff into like a tiny little pool of water, below.
You're supposed to just pass that by?
No, yeah, exactly. Oh, sorry, I'm looking for book content.
I think that's our ad. That's our ad for LoserCon.
That's right. LoserCon. Just jump.
Just
Just do. This is the time. Into the void. LoserCon
yes.
2025. All right. So digital ads, print ads, like a print ad in the New York Times book review is sort of like as an author, like it's like, yes, I would love to have my book, like featured in a, like a full page ad in the New York Times book review. That's going to sell books for sure. You would say no.
I would say no. And usually those ads in the New York Times book review are really to satisfy an author's ego, rather than sell
Satisfy
books.
mine. I love it.
They're
Please.
expensive. I
Yeah.
mean, even, they do a discount for independent publishers, but you're still looking at for full page black and white ad and with the discount is still about $19,000.
For an ad.
Mm-hmm.
19
You're not
grand.
making that money back.
No. But for a one glorious Sunday, you are going to
So
feel
one glorious
the
Sunday.
king of
Yeah.
the world, but
Yeah, sure. If that's what you, if that's what you think.
that's what you need. But, it's like you think digital ads well placed, like an Amazon ad, can be more effective and probably more cost effective, I would imagine, too, because you're only getting, you only pay for actual clicks instead of just
Exactly.
throwing it out there and crossing your fingers.
Yeah, exactly.
So then, like newsletters are another form of advertising. These feel more organic and authentic. Like that seems to be like
Yeah.
a more contemporary approach that might like reach people in a targeted way. I guess you can do that on social too, but it just seems like when I get like a Lit Hub newsletter or something like that, and they'll feature a book, like I do notice it at least.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and I book advertising for my clients and I advise them on it. And a lot of what I advise them on is specifically that, is doing newsletters, Washington Post Book Club, The Atlantic, Lit Hub, places like that where you're ending up in people's inboxes. That's really valuable, especially if the newsletter has really good content on the regular. So, and I think what we will see with Substack is an increase in Substacks who are taking advertising as well.
Yeah. I mean, do you take advertising or is that like in the works?
Not yet.
But it's going to
But
happen.
maybe I would.
Well, I mean, that
I
seems
wouldn't
like
say no.
if somebody's got a Substack that's book related and it's got a big audience and like especially like a sticky interactive audience, well, like what's better than that? That's exactly the demo you're looking
Nothing.
for.
Yeah, and they're not that expensive. I was advising someone. We took their newsletter off of MailChimp and we put it on Substack. It was an organization, nonprofit that I was working with, and they needed, revenue. And I said, well, why don't you start selling ads? And so we found out the going rate basically is about $750 for, like a top banner ad within your Substack. Of course it's depending on how many subscribers you have, but that's not chump change. You do that on the regular, you're making yourself a nice little pile of money.
Yeah. I mean, especially if you get multiple advertisers. And I think that when it comes to ad sales, just so people listening are clear, like this is something that a Substacker would do independently. There's not like a mechanism within Substack.
No.
No.
I think there will be eventually, but right now you do it on your own. So if I were to take advertising, I would approach publishers, marketing departments and publishing and say, I'm, selling advertising and this is how much it costs and this is how many subscribers I have, etc.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's better. There's no rev share, it's all, everything you get is yours in that way. So what else is there? There's, let's see, Amazon ads. We've done newsletters, digital ads, print ads, Goodreads. Like, is Goodreads like an advertising platform for people who want to try to get the word out?
Yeah, there's Goodreads giveaways, and I do them for clients sometimes, and it's nice because you get thousands of entries, and then the book ends up on their to be read shelf on Goodreads, and other people see it, but I think Goodreads, it's impossible to quantify sales from what you do on Goodreads. I think it's a pretty static website. I think, the design of it really hasn't changed over the years. I think its utility is very basic. It's just people keeping track of what they read and, writing reviews and sometimes not being nice to authors on there. So it can be toxic. So, there are different advertising programs that they have, and I feel like it's really hard to quantify. The other thing that publishers can do, I don't know what the cost is, but Free Little Library, they also have partnerships with publishers where they send out newsletters and things like that. And you can sponsor a newsletter, or there's ways to work with them. And I think that's kind of valuable too, because they have a huge, mailing list. So, you could get a little creative, but again, that budget has to be there, because if it's not, you're getting the bare minimum.
I feel like Goodreads, I would say like, I have this theory that like at least half of their traffic is just authors neurotically checking to see if their books have been
I think you're
reviewed.
right.
I
I think
mean,
you're absolutely
I
right.
hate to admit it, but I'm always checking that site just to see if anyone said anything. And like,
Mhm.
I don't know. It's like kind of an irresistible. I guess if your book is really getting tons and tons of reviews, then maybe it would become overwhelming. But for most authors, you get like that one review a week or two reviews a week, and it's sort of like catnip.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It messes with authors psychologically, I think, because it's the one tangible thing they can look at. It's like the Amazon rankings and the Goodreads reviews, because otherwise everything is sort of out there. I always talk about the invisible work that publicists do, that authors, I think, don't appreciate enough. All the pitching that goes on, all the research for your lists that go on, and all the emails you have to send out just to get 2 responses, if that. Those aren't things that authors can touch or see. So when they look at Amazon rankings or Goodreads reviews, it's feeding that monster.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, yeah, because you want some sort of metric, right? Like as a writer, you're just like, how's it doing out there? And I think the currency for authors that is most valuable is like an authentic response from a reader, hopefully positive, but like, so yeah, I don't know. I don't know how much good it does, like you say, psychologically for authors, or if there's any like real currency to trying to advertise their.
I mean, here's what it does, psychologically for authors. If you're an author and you're doing a giveaway on Goodreads and you see that there are 5,000 entrants, it makes you feel pretty good, because you're thinking 5,000 people want to read my book, when in reality, it's just 5,000 people wanting something for free. And, maybe they'll write a review for it. Maybe they won't. I don't know. But everybody likes a free thing. So
Yeah.
that's what happens a lot on there. I don't put a ton of stuff into Goodreads for that reason. I don't think it's useful. I think the website needs a total overhaul. It needs to be redesigned. It could be something great, but it's not going to happen, I think, as long as Amazon owns it.
Yeah, Amazon owns it, and they've got all this
Mhm.
money. Couldn't they get like some web designer to update that stuff?
I don't know. It's looked the same way since I first joined it years ago. So to me, it's a dinosaur.
Yeah. Well, what about like we talked about newsletters? There's email marketing. Is that different than newsletters? Are there things you can do in email?
Yeah. I mean, publishers have, email marketing, and they have their own lists. But again, it becomes problematic, because they can only put so many books in their email promotions that go out to their own lists. And then you have authors asking, why wasn't my book included in that? And, that's another one where you say, talk to your editor, because I know the answer to that. It's because your book, it's not as important as the books that they're putting in the newsletter. And I hate to say that, but it's true. These are books that they're hyping up, and your book isn't one of them. So, they have to pick and choose, and not everybody's book is in there. So, and I don't know what the conversion is for those either. I can't imagine they're incredibly high, but I feel like there are things underused by publishing, which is, text messaging. I think that there could be something there, getting into someone's phone. I think, publishers should develop their own apps. Something like that. There are different things that could be happening that are just not happening. And if those things were to happen, I think more books would benefit from them.
Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of creative things that I could imagine publishers doing, and they just don't.
Mhm.
It's got to be a cash flow issue, or maybe it's just like an inertia thing,
I
where
think
they're.
it's inertia, honestly. I don't think it's as much of a cash flow issue. I think it's just inertia. I think there's a lot of, we've always done this way, so we're going to keep doing it this way. I feel the same way about how, publishers try to be fair to every retailer and put, and try to do things to acquiesce to, every single retailer, when we all know that 80% of books are sold through Amazon. So, it's like, why break your back with Barnes and Noble when they're saying no to more than half your list because, the store managers are now in charge of buying for each store. It's up to them. So depending on what area they're in and what they see is the interest in the store, that's how they're going to order books. And I know, the genre that's taken the biggest hit with Barnes and Noble is like middle grade fiction. So why acquiesce to them if they're not giving you what you need as a retailer? It's the same thing with like, bookshop.org or like some of the indies and stuff like that. If they're, why are we bending over backwards for all these people where sometimes you can partner with maybe one retailer and do something special with them? I mean, people would scream about it, but I don't see a downside to it other than that.
So sales conferences, like I think we touched on this earlier where you drove across a golf course, but I don't know if this is a piece of the marketing process for the books that
it is.
Get the deluxe treatment.
Yes, definitely it is. Because you can't present every single book at sales conference. You can present a lot of them. And it goes something like this. You're sitting, when it was in person, you're all sitting at a long table. There's a screen behind you. There's a PowerPoint going on. And, you're like, click next slide. And you get to the big book and everybody's talking about the big book up there. The other thing, that I think people would be interested to know, and I've written about it, is what a get out number is. So a get out number is something that's discussed at sales conference. So if I have a big book that I'm publishing, I will put on that slide, the get out number is like, say, 75,000 copies. That's signaling, that's not an actual number. That's just a number signaling to the sales department. This is how many books I want to be able to ship eventually. But in reality, you're probably only shipping 30,000.
And the other 45,000 will sit in a warehouse waiting to be shipped?
No, you're not even printing that many.
Oh.
You're just saying, this is how big this book is. Like, I'm putting this number there because I want you to think of it as a book that you're getting 75,000 copies out of, which is so rare these days. And then if you're talking about a smaller book, you might put the get out number at 25,000 copies. And in reality, you're only shipping 10,000 copies. So it's all like a psychological thing, with the sales department. Like, this is the number of books that we want you to think that you're going to ship because this is a priority for us. But in actuality, we're billing much less. We're billing like 50,000, or say, your get out number is 150,000 copies. Maybe it's 75,000 copies that you're actually shipping to retail stores. So that is a big signal to them. And these numbers are totally made up, like totally made up.
That's wild.
That signals to them what they should be doing for that particular book. So if your get out number is really high, that's signaling to the sales department that this book is a priority.
So what's the get out number for Sally Rooney? Just because we're going to keep using Sally Rooney's book as an example, but for Intermezzo.
It's probably six figures easy. It's probably like over 150,000 copies, I'm sure.
Well, in hardcover, they're expecting to ship.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And just so people who are totally clueless have a clear picture of what's happening at a sales conference, like, this is an internal activity for these companies. This is not like booksellers show up and there's interactivity.
No.
It's just an internal conversation among the sales team about like priority and strategy.
Yep. And not everybody is invited to go either. Like, all editors are not invited to go. Certain editors are, maybe to present, a big book if they have it. The publisher usually drives the presentation, and the publicity director and marketing director are usually there. And, some slides with books, if they're big, you spend a lot of time talking about them. And then there are other slides where the book isn't big at all. And you're like, so this publication date is October 6th, and the get out number is 10,000 copies, which means you're getting out like 5, maybe 3. Click buy, and you're on to the next.
And so, authors will have no idea about any of this. This is internal, confidential company stuff.
Yep.
Authors are not privy to what happens at these meetings. And their editor, even if their editor is privy to it, their editor's probably not going to divulge to them.
No. Unless it's really, really good news. Like, we had sales conference, and the sales department loved the cover and loves the book and otherwise it's not going to get talked about.
I want to infiltrate a sales conference.
You don't. They're so boring.
I bet.
Oh my God.
Yeah. But it would just be interesting to be a fly on the wall to just see how, Penguin Random House does its full picks or whatever,
when we used to go away for them, they were fun. Like the one in Tennessee, our goodie bags when we got there were like Jack Daniels and like pecan pie and stuff. I had like Jack Daniels and pecan pie in my room because I flew in so late. So it was always fun like that. And you'd be able to go out to dinner with different sales reps. They put you in different groups of people you didn't know to go out to dinner with. And so it was like a bonding experience for people within the company too. But, a lot of it is talking about, the lists that are upcoming and what sales is going to do with them.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and nowadays you say they used to do them in person. Nowadays, is it all virtual?
Mm-hmm. I have no idea. I know, I left Skyhorse like 2 years ago. Simon & Schuster distributes them. And when the pandemic hit after that, it was virtual.
Everybody's at home just drinking Jack Daniels and eating pie.
Maybe.
Very likely.
Maybe.
Just off camera, all right. So publicity. Mm-hmm. Which again, in some respects is kind of like an opaque word for people. It's the kind of thing people understand in context, but they might not really understand what it means in practice. Like, I think you've even referred to publicity as like an invisible art form or invisible process. So can we illuminate this a little bit for people?
Yes. So publicity in the most simple terms is, publicist, someone like me, is pitching the media. That could be producers, radio or TV. It could be editors at magazines, newspapers. Digital media is a lot of what it is these days. It could be blogs, newsletters, all of that. We're pitching and pitching. We create a pitch, an email. We email way too many people all the time trying to get our authors on a show or get reviews or what have you. And the invisible work of it is, it takes a lot of effort to find the right people to pitch. And there's a lot of legwork involved in that and creating your lists and cultivating relationships with these people. And there's also a lot of pitching that goes on. And you're not going to get an update every other day because it's not like we can send emails and then follow up 24 hours later. That's a good way for somebody to ignore you the rest of their life. But, we on average, I would say you have to send out about 50 pitches to get one response, maybe 2.
See, and okay, because I'm on the receiving end of pitches all day, every day. And I often ponder if there's got to be a better way. Because it's a lot of work to put those pitch emails together, I would imagine, and you got to send them out and keep track of them and all that kind of stuff. So that part of it is a bunch of labor for the publicists. But then to be on the receiving end of it, it gets unmanageable very quickly to the point where, like, I'm just like, the reason you only get one response is because I'm just sitting there going, okay. And all of these pitch emails are like 1,500 word block
Yeah.
texts.
Which is not correct, not the correct way to do it.
What
It
I
should be a
would,
quick paragraph or two. That's
yeah,
it.
like one screen full, like you can't
Yeah,
scroll.
that's
But
it.
what I would recommend, and this is I guess where the tricky part comes in, but what I would recommend to publicists as a strategy, and there are publicists, like they're very few, but they are notable to me because they've done it this way, and they have a much more direct line to me for this reason, is that at least some percentage of the work that people are doing to send out these mass emails and to just kind of like carpet bomb pitches, hoping for some sort of reciprocity, spend like at least a quarter of that energy simply trying to meet people and cultivate actual human connection with them.
I totally
Because
agree.
that's half the battle. Like, I just need to know that there's a person on the other end of the line that I can talk to. And then if that person calls me up, call me, text me, like, get to that level of connectivity with somebody, and then make sure you're bringing them good stuff. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like, if you're bringing people like mediocrity and expecting them to champion it, like, that's not going to go well for you over, pretty soon. But
No, and what authors sometimes don't realize is that we spend years cultivating relationships with people sometimes. And something that I tell potential clients all the time is that I don't do emails. That is not my practice. Every email I send comes from me. And I think you know that. I do not go in and send these blasts out because that's not personalization. That's not showing the person on the receiving end that you care enough to address them by name. It's just constant, like, I'm just going to keep sending the same email over and over again. It's like banging your head against the wall. You're not going to get a response that way. But
well,
I understand why they do it, because they have to show the author or the client, like, this is how many people I contacted.
right. Well, I can say that nothing is more charming than receiving an email that begins, "Dear content creator." That is always cockle warming. It makes me feel human and loved, and it's the easiest way to get a response. But you'd be
Well,
surprised.
I'm starting to get pitches from publicists, from book publicists now. And I'm like, dude, you just sent me the first pitch like 24 hours ago. Don't follow up a day and a half later. Like, no.
Yeah,
Like,
honestly, just like a one sentence, like, "Hey, I love your newsletter. I would love to pitch you something. Would that be cool?" That
exactly.
that
That's
would
the way to
actually
do it to
that's
me.
yeah, and then you go, "Oh, they read my newsletter. Oh, they actually like are
Yeah.
engaged," and like it's not just like some kind of like impersonal exercise. And then you get a response, and then you can begin a dialogue. Like, I feel like I've learned things about that practice that might be beneficial to publicists, but I also don't want to minimize like the overwhelming amount of labor that they are required to do. I mean, it's not an easy,
Absolutely.
it's not
No.
an easy solution for them either. Like, because you can't, it's too slow to try to cultivate personal relationships with each and every place that you're reaching out to. It's
Yep.
a math problem.
And when you have to report back to a client, or you have to report in, to a publisher about what's going on with a particular title, it's unnerving, because you know that you have to say, well, I haven't heard any. And when you say that, people automatically tend to think you didn't do any work. But a lot of work goes into not hearing back.
I went through this as a debut author. I stupidly walked into, like, I insulted my publicist without meaning to, just because I didn't understand anything about the book business. I mean, I still have, I feel like, a limited vantage point on the internals of how it works, even though I've been, repeatedly asking you questions about it for years now. But I I said, I don't even remember what I said, but I just remember her response startled me because I wasn't intending it as an insult, but it was because she was an underpaid junior publicist
Mm-hmm.
who had been working her ass off. And I made
Mm-hmm.
some remark and she just was like, "Wah!" And I was like, "Oh, I just fucked myself." I was like, "I'm so sorry." And I just sort of
That's the
shut
thing
up.
too, and I would say that to anybody, whether you're freelance like me or whether you're working in house, we're all swamped and we're all doing the best we can. And the only thing we can guarantee is our best effort, and we can't guarantee sales. We can't guarantee reviews. reviews, anyone that says they can guarantee publicity coverage is lying. That's
Right.
not true.
Yeah.
And it's, and, something, and this is not an insult to the publicists that work on these books, but, if you're Sally Rooney's publicist, you don't have to try that hard. That's a gift.
Yeah. I was
You're
going to say,
given this gift.
yeah.
And because I've been in that position where people are like, oh my God, you worked on that book. And in my head, I'm like, well, yeah, it was always going to work. It was always going to be a bestseller. I know that, so it depends less on the publicist and more on what the publisher puts behind it is really what it is. So be nice to your publicists.
That's
people.
right. That's right. And when it comes to publicity, I mean, book tours sort of feels like it's the publicity equivalent of the full page print ad in the New York Times book review. I think authors love the idea of their publisher cutting a check and sending them out across the country on some sort of tour, putting them up at hotels, paying their per diem. And, there's going to be a series of like packed bookstores, but that's not usually the case.
No, it's not. And I emphasize this so much to people. It's quantity, the quality matters more than the quantity. If you're looking at quantity only, you're setting yourself up for failure and disappointment because you're asking people to spend money on gas, spend money possibly on a babysitter, spend money on a meal, spend money on a book, and come see you for what? People, I could go binge stream something on Netflix right now instead of going out. So it really has to be worthwhile. And authors need to get unstuck on this thing that going on tour legitimizes them as an author, because that's not true. You wrote a book and you publish it. That's what legitimizes you. A review doesn't legitimize you. A book tour doesn't legitimize you. Getting published does. But at the same time, you have to look at the cost benefit. Do you really want your publisher to write a check for you to go to like 5 cities? Or do you want them to do some micro targeting advertising like on Amazon or something that could really sell your book and help your sales numbers so that when you go and sell the next book, you get more money for it?
I might be in the minority here, but I have long said that literary readings and those kinds of events underwhelm me almost all the time.
Me too.
And they make me a nervous wreck because I used to, host a reading series here in LA connected to my literary magazine. And of course, everyone would be like, let's do a reading. And I would say, okay. And then it would be me responsible for putting this thing on. And I would be a nervous wreck because I'm like, what if nobody shows up?
Right.
And we would have bands. I mean, it was like we were trying to make this whole thing of it. And I'll never forget hosting an event and the band went on after the readings and there was like, everybody had left. Like I made the stupid decision to have like 8 readers, which is way too many for a single night. Everybody's just like numb. Yes. And then people file out to go off to get food because they're starving. And then the band went on and it was like me and like 2 other people in the crowd. And I was just like, all the money I had made at the door, I just gave to the band. I was like, I'm so sorry.
Well, the other thing that's changed with bookstores is that they want full marketing plans now for any author that you're pitching. They want to know how many emails the author is going to send out, how many people they can invite, what their social numbers are, what platforms they're on, what their following is, and all that. And they make a decision, based on those things rather than, okay, sure, come in, have a book signing. And I try to tell authors this all the time. Like the onus is on you to bring in a crowd. The bookstore is not going to do it. So, it's really something to consider. I was contacting bookstores, on behalf of one of my clients and, one of them came back and said, well, we need a full marketing from you. And, a couple of others were like, what's that person's social numbers and things like that. They didn't have a big platform. So you have to think about that. Like, do you want to be responsible? Do you want to be the one responsible for inviting people to your own little party? And depending on, either, close connections, sort of close connections and barely acquaintances, is your neighbor going to go? I don't think so. So
Yeah. I mean,
it's really something to think about.
I will never say no if somebody invites me to come read at a thing. Like I'm happy to,
Right.
I'll do it. Yeah. Like I'll do it. I don't love it, but I'll do it. I would be perfectly content for the rest of my life to never do another bookstore event where I'm the primary mover. No thanks. Like it's not
No,
my thing. I'm
no.
happy to.
And and this is why we need to do loser con.
That's right. LoserCon, no readings. Just show up and mingle and have like we'll have past foods maybe or like a buffet.
Here's the tagline: we sell no books.
That's right. LoserCon. Just show up, maybe
Just show
if you
up,
want
maybe.
to. Some DJ in the corner.
Yep. Playing sad songs.
That's right. Just playing just emo soundtrack music. So what about media? Because, we've talked about print ads, we've talked about digital ads and like social ads and Amazon ads and all that kind of stuff. But when it comes to publicity, I think again, author fantasies, it's like Terry, like some sort of like deep dive conversation with Terry Gross.
Yeah.
That's like the dream, or getting on one of these morning shows, having like Jenna Bush pick your book for the book, those kinds of things. There are some things in big national media that still can move copies. It's not a lot, but it's like the celebrity book clubs, big morning shows, maybe like Fresh Air.
Mm-hmm. And Fresh Air, not as much as it used to, because there's so much audience fragmentation, because our attention spans are everywhere now. And, the thing with the celebrity book clubs is the same thing as we've been talking about. It's publishers who earmark books that they're going to pitch heavily to those book clubs. And it happens about 9 months in advance. So they're doing it with manuscripts, not even arcs. And it's highly competitive. And I'm sure that all the imprints within a publishing house decide which books they're going to earmark to try to get a book club picks. And that's also difficult because it's not that easy, and authors can't live in a dream world where they think, oh, my book's coming out in 2 months. You think it'll be a Jenna pick. That's not how it works. It needs to be pitched about 9 months, sometimes even a year in advance.
And those are like oftentimes personal conversations and connections and favor trading, God knows what. And it's making me think like, God, I wish there was a celebrity like who was like a man or a woman of the people who would have like a LoserCon approach to book, like celebrity book club, where it's like, yeah, I'm only picking indie titles and I'm not accepting any titles from the big five or whatever. And I'm going to pick, I'm going to pick great books, but they're just going to be books that are sort of underdogs. Like someone should do that, because all these all these celebrities are picking, I mean, they're good books, but a lot of times it's like, it could not be more commercial. Like you can see the cover and you're like, okay, I know exactly what's happening here. Like these are the books at the sales conference that's on slide number 1 in the PowerPoint. But I think that there is space for a celebrity book club that has like maybe a more cultivated and edgy sensibility, and nobody's doing it. So for all the celebrities listening right now, and I know there are many, this could be your opportunity. It would be
the loser book club.
That's right. The loser, like the biggest.
You heard it here first.
That's right. But by the way, I think it would be beloved. I think that it would give that person cultural cachet, like somebody who's really got a good curatorial sense or is getting good advice, could do a super cool book club that would cut against the grain.
Yeah, that would be really great. And not the commercial stuff, just the like kind of really indie literary fiction, maybe some gritty stuff, stuff like that. It would be so wonderful for the industry for that to happen.
Trying to think of who it would be. Who's somebody who could pull that?
No,
I feel like Mark. Why am I in love with Mark Ruffalo? I think he just seems like a nice, friendly guy with like, he's kind of edgy and like left of center in a good way. But I'm trying to think
of who, like a female,
Chloe Sevigny or whatever. She's edgy.
She's too avant-garde.
Yeah, that's right.
I think. We need someone with a little bit of a, I don't know, popular but also beloved.
Who's got who's
But
got good taste is for a pop, like somebody who's really got currency is Dua Lipa.
I was just going to say her. I get her newsletter
So do I.
for her book club, and she picks stuff that's not, totally commercial,
That's right.
and I respect it.
No,
You know, and
she's a good reader. She strikes me as so,
she
like
is,
a smart cookie who's like who actually really loves books. You know, it's like you can
yeah,
tell.
yeah,
It's not just
yeah.
like, oh,
So
this is fun.
there
You know.
there needs to be more of her, like more people like her doing that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, okay, media. Just so people are clear, because I think this is a question that a lot of authors have, especially pre-pub, where they're dreaming, or even while they're writing their manuscript and dreaming. Is like, what are the media outlets that would be top of list? Like this is going to make your career kind of thing. Is there anything like that?
To me, the crown jewel of it is CBS Sunday Morning, because it's like the NPR of television, and they have so many viewers. And usually, when a book, when an author is on there, their books end up on the bestseller list. Like they just do such a good job with their segments, and they're very meaty segments, and you really get to know the person. I think like The View is another one that can sell books, but the problem, with them is that they're very current events topic driven. So it's mostly nonfiction. And with CBS Sunday Morning, who I have a really good relationship with, it takes months, of cultivating a relationship and talking to them about why they should profile your person. Um, and, sometimes it could take years before they get to that person. But, to me, that is top notch. Will definitely sell books. Um, I write about this quite a bit, which is reviews don't really sell books. They have their place in the publishing ecosystem, but for the most part, you can't, unless there is a mass quantity of reviews happening at the same time, which we'll see with Sally Rooney's book, but that was going to sell anyway. That's the thing, and we'll see a ton of reviews happen right around pub date and all over the place for her. And so when you have a quantity of that all happening at the same time, it can affect sales. But if you're talking about one review in the New York Times, it's like a little blip and that's it. And I've also seen authors who got fantastic, publicity where they're on, on NPR, they're on CNN, they're on, some high profile podcasts, and the book isn't moving. So, you can get all that stuff, but I think what I would impart to people, especially to authors, is that it's so important to connect with your audience these days, because the media as a medium is not the only thing that's going to do it. We live in a society now where people want direct contact with whoever, with celebrities, with authors, and I think that it's really important for authors to realize that. And that's why I always preach that it is important for them to have platforms, because what's going to happen is the media is going to shrink, and there will be more social media platforms that emerge, I'm sure. And that's more of a chance to connect directly with your audience.
So, like having a platform,
Mm-hmm.
cultivating a Substack audience or
Mm-hmm.
readership, doing a
Yeah.
podcast, like all these different
Yep.
things. Because, like you
Yeah.
say, it's such a fragmented media environment that even a show like Fresh Air I'm imagining, has lost a lot of its currency just because there's a billion talk shows out there. It's not that they don't still have a good listenership or that it's not still the same great show that it's always been. It's just that there's a lot more people at the party now,
Yeah.
and
Absolutely.
it's got to have an impact. So
Yep.
there are other aspects of publicity that I will let people read in your Substack and your essay that we're kind of using as source material for this conversation. But a couple of things before I let you go, just to maybe put a finer point on it, like there is labor that can be done by the author herself to uh, like move the needle. And maybe this is like,
Mhm.
like I would say maybe the primary work for any author is that, it's got to be done by you if it's going to be done by anybody, especially in the early going, unless you get a very lucky ride, like a Sally Rooney, like just to keep making a commercial for Sally Rooney, who's benefiting from this podcast despite her reluctance to
Yeah.
talk to me. From the get go, this first book is a breakout. And so your career is just sort of on that trajectory. But for the vast majority of people, you're going to have to do things to set the tone for sales and to, go meet readers where they are and to
Mhm.
introduce yourself
Yep.
to them. So you need to be your own best publicist. And
Yep.
not every writer is adept at that. Some people have some reluctance to do that sort of stuff, but you kind of got to get over it. And I think it's not that like, if you're some shy person and you don't like the sound of your own voice, that doesn't mean you have to, go start podcasting, but you do have to find something that you
Right.
like to do.
Yeah, you do. And, it really is beneficial for authors to know that you can't take a back seat to your own book promotion. You can't put it in somebody else's hands and then just sit back and think that that other person is just going to do everything and you don't have to do anything. That's not how it works anymore.
And if you are an author who, let's just say, is about to debut, or you've got like your whatever, you have another book coming out, you've published several, and you're like, I really want to put my best foot forward. And I know that I am not at the top of the priority list for my publisher. Even though I'm published by Random House, I know that I'm not
Mhm.
their, top of list title for the fall, but I'm on that list and I'm probably going to get, a little bit of attention, but not a ton. And I want to try to help the cause. What do you have to say to people who might have some extra money and an interest in hiring help? What can that add to the process, and what can people expect for that money?
Have a conversation with, someone like me or, another freelance publicist. Conversations are free. So have a conversation and see they're free with me at least, not consultations, but conversations. See where you land because sometimes I have conversations with authors who think they need to hire someone and I ask them, what their publisher is doing. And I'm like, you don't need like it's obvious to me that you're a priority to your publisher. So I'm really honest and I won't take people's money if I see that other things are being done for them and I wouldn't add anything to it. But really, have conversations with people and figure out what works for you and your budget. Because, the thing that you need to know is yes, hiring a freelance publicist can help, but it doesn't always help. And, maybe I'm shooting myself in the foot here, but publicists aren't miracle workers and you can't just depend on them to make everything happen. I work with people on all different kinds of things. I do audience building with them. I do, you know, um, Substack consultations and getting people to launch their Substacks and building community there. It's all about building an audience and developing them. And if you're not willing to do that, you're going to be in trouble going forward, I think.
Yeah, that's but I think there are people, and I think it's kind of project specific too. I would imagine where
Mm-hmm.
if somebody has written, let's just say a memoir that has uh, like a very natural target audience connected to it, like it's a sports memoir or it's a something to do with cooking. You know what I'm saying? Like I would imagine
Mm-hmm.
that as a publicist, if that book is not getting like high level attention from its publisher, that you might be able to help somebody strategize.
Yeah.
That work isn't simple, and I think a lot of times writers
Yeah.
struggle with that part of it. But there can be real tangible benefit, especially if you
Mm-hmm.
do it way out in advance and you give yourself time to cultivate prior to the book dropping, where you can, be effective at helping somebody like locate their readership and then begin a dialogue with them in ways
Mm-hmm.
that could
Yep.
be like tangibly beneficial.
100%. Yes.
So where can people find you? I mean, we sort of talked about your Substack, but like, what's your, like, give people the Kathleen Schmidt like pitch in case they haven't heard it before so they can track you down on the internet.
if you are an author and you're interested in learning about my services, you can go to my website, which is kmspr.com. You can email me at Kathleen@kmspr.com. I can be found in those two places. And the newsletter is Publishing Confidential, and it comes out a couple of times a week.
On
I write
Substack.
on Substack. And it's really me demystifying the publishing process for people and talking about issues that the industry faces. So, and I do, both publicity, marketing, and branding. So I have, I also do consultations. So if you think that, you want to have a chat just to talk about what can be done, and you don't want to hire, you don't want to do the full budget hiring of a freelance publicist, I do consultations for that kind of stuff too.
All right. Well, it's always a pleasure to talk with you. It's always
Same here.
illuminating. I look forward to seeing you at LoserCon 2025. What is it? It's going to be, what's like a crummy place in New Jersey? We'll go to, like downstate or something. I don't know. I'm just trying to think of like a
Hackensack.
Yeah. We'll go to the Courtyard by Marriott Ballroom in Hackensack, New Jersey for LoserCon 2025. Very much looking forward to it, as I know the literati is as well. And I thank you for the time, and I wish you well.
Thank you, Brett.